Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 54, Shopaholic. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Val swings by the Sheffield home to break some disturbing news to Fran in person. Fran's ex-fiance Danny Imperiali is worse than dead. He's getting married. Niles shares the news with the Sheffields, who are concerned about how Fran is coping. She reassures everyone that she's fine and hasn't done anything weird. Her assurances are immediately contradicted when Niles brings in the power drill she ordered. The power drill is the first of many unusual purchases, including towel racks, a saddle, a pasta maker, coral lipstick, and a box of hair coloring. Gracie shares her concern that Fran is compensating for feelings of inadequacy by acting out with obsessive compulsive behavior with Maxwell after an exhausting shopping trip, and Maxwell decides to intervene and assist Fran in getting help through the Shoppers Anonymous program. Fran embarks on a 12-step program, and Maxwell offers to be with her first night, despite her previous attempt to steal his credit card. After making it through the first 24 hours, her shopping sobriety is challenged by the Tupperware party she agreed to host. Turns out the reason Danny and Heather Biblow are getting married is that Heather's pregnant. Fran stole Niles' wallet and took his money to an outlet store in Jersey, where Maxwell finds her and puts an end to her shopping extravaganza with a perfectly timed, passionate kiss, which she doesn't recall due to her shopper's blackout. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
No, you got it.
Awesome. Would you like to take us to scene 1 then?
Yes, so we open this episode in the kitchen. Niles is chopping some vegetables, and Fran's also at the counter filling out what we learned to be another credit card application.
Yes.
As she's filling it out, she's lamenting at how credit card applications require so much information, married or single. I hate that box. Mother's maiden name, Kennedy. And again, we learn that Fran has in the past helped Niles fill out a credit card application. She did so by lying on it, and he points out, wasn't it enough that you lied on my gold card application? And she said, oh, I just did it to make you sound better. And he's like, under occupation, you wrote that that I was Frasier's brother.
Right.
And she says, well, he won the Emmy and it upped your limit. So Val then comes in through the side door and she has her hand over her mouth and she's just like, oh, Fran. And Fran immediately is like, someone died? Someone she's like, oh God, Fran, I'm so sorry. Someone died? Famous? And Val's response is just, Danny. And immediately Fran goes, Danny Thomas, Danny K, Danny Bonaducci. He's so young. Who would have thought he would die before Reuben Kincaid? And Val's like, no. Danny, your ex-fiance, Danny Imperiali. I left out a syllable there. And Fran's still thinking this is about news about a death, says, well, when you gotta go, you gotta go. Very nonchalant, sits back down at the kitchen table. And Val explains, no, he's getting married. No, Danny, why? Why not me first? So we get the response from Fran that you would typically expect to get if you heard that someone has passed away. But no, we get that in response to the news that Danny is getting married. So it's a pretty quick opening scene. But that is the big kind of catalyst for the rest of this episode. Do you have anything to add to that opening scene?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay.
I was just reviewing my notes.
Then do you want to take us to the dining room?
I would love to. So it's breakfast time, and the family plus Niles minus Fran are all sitting at the table. And I stress that Niles is sitting at the table and he's basically recapping. Actually, I think Maxwell comes in, but Niles is clearly gossiping with the children, and he's recapping scene one, the way, kind of like the way Bernadette just did, but to the children, telling them, that Danny's getting married, like he's getting married, and Maxwell basically is like, stop it. Like, we don't need to talk about this. Like, and then I think it's Brighton who actually asks, who's Danny marrying? And Niall says Heather Biblow. And that's what gets Maxwell's attention. No, the tramp who stole him away from Miss Fine. And Niall's like, but you didn't hear it from me, which is actually, I think, a catchphrase Niles has throughout this episode. Like he'll provide information and then add, but you didn't hear it from me.
Yes.
Like as if that makes it so much better. Gracie reacts to the news. Oi, I'm plotzing from this news. And, Maxwell comes to the conclusion that everyone who has not seen scene one has already come to, that this is going to destroy Miss Fine. Oh, but here she comes. Everybody act normal. And Niles is still sitting at the table drinking, and he's like, oh, I should serve. And he gets up. And Fran walks in, and she's dressed, which is unusual for breakfast time. And she greets everyone like she normally does. Good morning, everyone. Beautiful day, isn't it? And she, she's getting her breakfast, and she sits down. And Maxwell says to her, now, Miss Fine, it's not healthy for you to keep it all bottled up inside. You've got to let it out. And Fran gets a little annoyed at Niles that you had to tell everyone. And then she turns back to the family. Meanwhile, if you're so concerned about my problem, how come I don't see any stewed prunes on the table? And clearly she's thinking of a different problem she's confronting. And Maxwell clarifies, no, I meant your ex-fiance marrying Heather Biblow. And Fran's like, that. I could care less. Let someone else comb the tangles out of his back. It doesn't bother me. And they all like stare at her because they don't believe her. And I mean, we've all seen scene one, so we know that she reacted poorly to the news. And she tries to reassure the family, oh, come on, how long have you people known me? What's the first thing I do when I'm upset? And this is where we have a reference that isn't actually spoken, but is clear. They're referencing Family Feud, in that the three children kind of huddle together, over the table and start guessing options. Eat a box of Malamars, rent the way we were. Blame your mother. And the kids are like, good answer. They clap. And Fran tries to reassure everybody that she hasn't done anything unusual or odd or out of the ordinary. And in one of those classic, excellent timing points that the show has, Niles walks in and asks, who ordered the power drill? It turns out it was Fran. And she takes it from him. She looks at it and she admires it and says that she's definitely getting the matching table saw for this baby. And Gracie says to her, if you're depressed, buying things won't make you happy. And Fran hugs her and, thanks her for her concern. You're sweet. You're a very wise little girl, Gracie. I'll buy you a toy. And Gracie gives up saying, well, if she's happy, I'm happy. And Maxwell is still focused on the fact that Fran bought a power drill. It's a power tool. What are you going to do with that? And she's like, oh, I have lots of uses for it. Like I'll make a latte. And she uses it in a coffee cup as if making a latte. I didn't find that particularly convincing or a particularly good use of a power drill, but live and let live, right?
Yep.
Do you have anything you want to add?
No.
Would you like to take us to scene 3, which I think is super short?
Yes, it's a transition scene. It's kind of like a montage in a way. We have the song You Better Shop Around kind of playing in the background as Fran is dragging Gracie around town shopping. And we see, them coming out of a store, and, Fran has a bunch of bags, and then poor Gracie is carrying just a tower of boxes. And they stop by a hot dog stand, and there's actually kind of a little hole among the boxes so that Fran can put the hot dog in Gracie's mouth, and then also she kind of puts in some ketchup in the same little hole.
Correct. Not at the same time.
No, after. And then we're, we kind of see a limo is taking them around, and Gracie's kind of like, I'm tired, and Fran's like, no, I gotta take you to one more place, Jersey. So again, it's just a quick little transition scene to kind of set up that they have been shopping a lot. Do you want to take us to the next scene, or do you have anything to add to that one?
I'll just mention that in the transition scene, we do see like the storefronts of a number of stores.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we'll probably talk about their names in our notable New Yorkers segment. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right. So in scene 4, we're now apparently in one of the outlet malls in Jersey, and Gracie is complaining again that she's tired, that she can't shop anymore. And Fran's like, what are you, an amateur? We haven't even hit Ann Taylor's Contempo Casuals or the Limited. Hop on my back, hop on my back. Like as if that's the proper response to a child saying, I'm tired. And
Mm-hmm.
Gracie, good for her, stands up for herself and says, Fran, you're scaring me. You buy something every time you mention his name. Whose name? Danny. And immediately Fran does exactly what Gracie said she was doing. She grabs something and like picks it up, puts it in front of a sales associate. Can I have this in mushroom? And Gracie further analyzes her, saying that I think you're upset that he's engaged. And Fran, of course, is in denial and says, you are so off base. And then she's doing this, she's continuing the unusual shopping behavior. She looks at this dress that's on a hanger in a proper display and says, would you look how gorgeous this dress is? I wish it came in black. And she looks around and she sees that dress on a mannequin, and she says, ooh, and grabs it, rips it off the mannequin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you. That's not how I shop.
Nope.
So Gracie says what the audience is thinking. I think you have a problem. And Fran says, oh, you're not kidding. Look at those animals over there grabbing at the fake Gucci belts. Okay, sweetie, work with me. Work with me. And, again, she's totally in denial. She's ignoring the issue that Gracie has identified. And instead she says to Gracie, work with me. And she lies on the floor and starts wiggling her limbs, saying, help, help, help. I had shellfish and I'm allergic. Help, help. And the people come, like they're being good Samaritans. They come to try to help her. And Fran directs Gracie, grab the belts, the suedes, the suedes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's basically where the scene ends. It's not a flattering look for Fran, shall we say.
No, and I will just note that she's not very convincing as she's flailing on the ground.
No, but the people still came to try to help her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So would you like to take us to the kitchen?
Yes. So we're in the kitchen, and Niles is removing from the freezer something. And, Maxwell asks him, oh, what are those? Oh, they're Bur Animals freezer treats. They're the hostess gift for hosting the Tupperware party. Tupperware party? Oh, did Miss Fine not tell you? No. And if she had, I never would have agreed to it. Then she made the right choice.
Correct.
And so Niall starts saying, oh, well, I think he starts trying to explain, and Maxwell's like, oh, just spare me the details. And Niles is kind of like, okay, but it has to do with Danny and Heather Biplow, and that catches Maxwell's attention. And of course, as you said, Niles throughout this episode starts with, well, you didn't hear it from me. Because this is after, he says it's about Danny and Heather Biblow. So, Maxwell's like, okay, Niles dish. Well, you didn't hear it from me. Apparently, Heather wants Val out of the shop, the bridal shop. And so Danny fired her. No, he didn't. He did. And Niles offers something to Maxwell, and Maxwell was like, no, I'm watching, my weight. And then that prompts Niles to say, speaking of which, Val gained back 5 pounds she lost. Well, I was going to say, says Maxwell. You can guess my thoughts on this exchange.
I thought of you when I saw this exchange.
Yeah. But then Maxwell does go after one of the Bur Animal freezer treats, and Niall says, wait, you have to let it thaw a bit, otherwise it's going to stick to your tongue. So, Maxwell doesn't do it. But who should walk in at that moment but Cece?
Uh-huh.
She spots the freezer treats, yummy. And so Niles goes, have one. And so
Yes,
she picks up one, and it looks like a cow to me. Did it look like that to you?
it did.
Okay.
Either a cow or a bear. It was sort of unclear to me. It looked more like a cow, but based off the name Burr, freezer, to me, it sounded like a bear. But anyway,
Yeah. I think it
irrelevant.
was like a variety of animals. But anyway, this one to me looked like a cow. And so, of course, she licks it, it gets stuck on her tongue. And so she starts kind of, you know, that scene in A Christmas Story? Is that what it's called? Where like the guy gets his tongue stuck on the pole outside and he's trying to talk, but obviously it's not clear. Anyway, this is Cece, where she's kind of, you can't quite hear her very well, but definitely Maxwell can't understand her because Niles takes it upon himself to interpret. I believe she just quit, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, obviously that is not what Cece said. Cece again starts talking about how it's stuck on her tongue. And Niles once again is like, she's saying she's uncomfortable in that dress. She never should have tried to squeeze into a size 6. Again, you can think of what my thoughts are on this. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
um, so and Max was like, "Is that what she really said?" And Niall says, "No, but isn't it obvious?" And then you can hear again her tongue still stuck to the treat. I'll kill you.
That one you can make out very clearly.
Exactly. And so Niles is like, "Oh, Miss Babcock, just come here." And he ushers her to the side door. Just go out here and stick your tongue out to the sun. That should work. Really? All right. And so she goes out. And after Niles closes the door, Maxwell's like, "Why didn't you tell her to just, get some hot water?" "Oh, that's not nearly as fun, sir."
Not nearly as funny. Look.
No, funny. Yeah. And so obviously it's classic Niles CC. But at that moment, Fran walks in from the interior door, and she is bedecked in a ski outfit. And she says she she's ready for the giant shalom. And uh, Maxwell corrects her. It's slalom, Miss Fine. And like, you don't even ski. And she's like, "Oh, well, if I even step foot out of the lodge, this outfit's going back." The purpose of the outfit is not to actually ski.
Correct.
um and again, she's obviously been shopping a lot. But they're like, "You don't even need this." But then she's like, "Oh, I got you some gifties." Hands them bags. And in the meantime, Gracie comes in, because again they're commenting about, this is stuff like she doesn't need, and she's like, "Oh no, it's all stuff I do." Well, Gracie informs Fran that the guy has delivered the Soloflex and he's wanting to know where to put it, and Fran asks, "Does he look like the guy in the commercial?" And when Gracie says yes he does, then she says, "I'll show him," and
Mm-hmm.
exits. And that's when Gracie kind of addresses Maxwell and says, "Daddy, I'm worried about Fran." And like she's been doing this whole episode, she's kind of analyzing Fran, and she says, "I feel like she's compensating feelings of inadequacies by acting out with obsessive compulsive behavior." And Maxwell's like, "No, honey, like, you spend more time in therapy than daddy does. So once again, small words."
Right.
And Gracie just goes, "She's nuts." Um,
Much, much, much smaller words.
yes. And at this point, Cece's back in, no longer stuck to the freezer treat, but she's lisping, you know. And she interprets for Gracie and says, "The woman's a shopaholic." And then they kind of look at her because she's lisping, and she goes, "Sorry, freezer burn."
Mm-hmm.
And that is the scene. Do you have anything to add?
I do not.
Okay, take us to the next scene.
So we're now in Fran's room, and we've seen Fran's room before, but it's never looked quite like this. Um, to say it's full of new stuff is an understatement. And we'll see some of the unusual things in the scene. But we start the scene, and she's on what I assume is the Soloflex. She's on some workout equipment, and she's on the phone placing an order, and she gives the last four of her credit card and expiration date. My guess, any second. Hello, like the person hung up on her. And so I think, I can't recall if it's right before Maxwell walks in or right after he walks in, but she's clearly watching like Home Shopping Network or QVC or something. And she says, "Would you look at the way that steak just defrosted? Boy, I got to get me one of those."
Mm-hmm.
And to that, Maxwell is now definitely in the room, and he says that we're a little concerned that your shopping's got a little out of hand. And she's like, "That's ridiculous. I only bought stuff I absolutely needed. Watch out for the saddle." Because they're like walking through the room, and like, again, her room is now very cluttered and full of, frankly, junk, including a saddle, which clearly she did not need living in New York without a horse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Maxwell kind of tries to get her attention and get her to focus on all of the junk. Look at all the junk: towel racks, a pasta maker, a box of hair coloring. And that one catches her attention. Hair coloring? How did that get in here? I don't use that. And then she clearly tries to like hide it, which indicates she probably does use it. And Maxwell tells her that this is serious. You're a shopaholic. And she's like, no, I'm not. I'm just a social shopper. Once, twice a day to take the edge off. And he tells her it's obvious to us that you're in, and he can't think of the word. Gracie walks by shouting, "Denial."
Mm-hmm.
And so Maxwell tries to like get to the source of things. Is there a history of shopping in your family? She's like, no. I mean, my dad would after work stop off and pick up a couple of things with the boys. Did you start shopping as a teenager? Well, all the girls were doing it. Do you have to make a purchase first thing in the morning? Are holidays especially rough on you? Do you hide your purchases around the house? And she's like, no, it's not true, I tell you. And she moves one of the pillows from her bed, and guess what? We see a food processor,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of a better word, which she had clearly hidden around at least her bedroom. And Maxwell again says to her, "You need help." And she's like, "No, I don't. I can stop whenever I want to. It's just I like it. When I go to a department store just filled with shiny new things, it's like all my problems go away and I'm flying." And Maxwell kind of, by this point, she's like stood up again. "Miss Fine, look at yourself." And she takes a good hard look at herself in the mirror. "Oh my God, Mr. Sheffield, you're right. I bought coral lipstick. I'm sick. I need help. Oh, Mr. Sheffield, maybe you can send me to one of those clinics where I can, dry out. Of course, I'm going to need a couple of things." I'm not quite sure why the coral lipstick is the thing that tipped her off that she was in trouble instead of all of the clutter around her room.
Mm-hmm.
But at least she realizes she needs help.
Mm-hmm.
So
And I
you,
believe they like hug at the end.
yeah. So she's like, he's like holding her, and that's when she's like, send me to the clinic. Although I'm going to need a few things. Like, clearly a shopaholic answer.
Yep.
Do you want to add anything else?
No, I am ready for the next scene in the dining room.
Excellent.
So the family's in the dining room and everybody there is there except for Fran at this point. Brighton is actually looking through a Victoria's Secret catalog and Maxwell kind of notes this, like, why are you doing that? Oh, Christmas shopping. And then he turns to a page, holds it out to Maxwell. Can I have her?
Yeah.
Again, not great. Anyway,
Mm-mm.
and Maxwell too is like Brighton, like throw that away. And Niles intervenes by taking it. "I'll throw it away, sir." And then he puts it in his inner jacket pocket. Clearly
Correct.
not going to throw it away. And
Correct.
Maxwell tells everybody, "Okay, Miss Fine's about to come back from her shoppers anonymous meeting, so no more talk of shopping." Fran walks in, hello, sits down. And of course, right away, Niles is serving, and Maxwell says, "Oh, that's far too much. Take a half off." Oh,
Right.
and and Fran immediately was like, "Oh, don't worry. Like, no, no, I don't want anybody walking on eggshells around me. If it comes to it, I can just recite my little prayer or like saying, 'God, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot exchange. I mean, change.'"
Right.
And, Maxwell's commending her about getting help. That's great. That's the first step. And she's like, actually, and she pulls out a little pamphlet. Um, in my 12-step program, the first step is actually to apologize, because my addiction affects all of you. And she kind of looks around, so sorry. And that's it. And Maggie had, I think she kind of got up or she,
Yeah.
or and is kind of like, yeah, it really does, dragging me into all those stores and buying things that look good on me. That's not going to stop, is it? Because obviously she sees this as a plus. And Maxwell's like, Margaret, you're not helping. So she goes and sits back down. And then step two, you know, what is it? Oh, it's a bit smudgy. And Maxwell takes it from her. Oh, no, it's very clear. Cut up all credit cards. And she's like, that's too cruel. And she opens her wallet. And if you recall, I don't know if they're still around or not, but the wallets that used to have a ton of um, plastic insert, so it flops down and you could put credit cards or pictures or
I
whatever.
was gonna say they're usually used for pictures, which makes
Yeah,
sense because right before she describes them as they're like my kids.
well, that's what I was gonna say. She's saying that as she's doing it. So again, it would have been pictures, but it's the credit cards. And she's like, oh, look, this is my oldest, 12 in June. Oh, and this little one, you should have seen what it bought me for my birthday. And by this point, like Niles has on a tray brought a pair of scissors, and Maxwell's taking them and kind of passing it to Fran, indicating she needs to. And she's like, oh, let me keep the one with mileage. I'm so close to Israel. And then, they're still insisting with the scissors. So she's like, oh no, which one to start with? Oh, okay, this one. This one just gives me gas. And she
Right.
has that one. Do you have anything to add to that scene?
It's just interesting that she had a gas card when she lives in New York City and doesn't have a car.
Yeah. Well, that's why she apparently wasn't too hung up on
Right, but like why would she even have it? Like in the
because
first
she
place?
needs because it's a baby for her.
Okay, fine. It's filling a deeper void in her life. I got it.
Uh-huh.
All right. So in scene 8, we are, I believe, in the living room, and Fran is clearly going through withdrawal. She's complaining about how she's not going to make it. She needs to buy something, how it hurts. And I think Maxwell tells Niles to hold her down. I've got the credit card receipt. And so he like sticks the credit card receipt right up to her nose, and she breathes it in. Oh, that's it. Bloomingdale's, that's the good stuff. And so Maxwell tries to tell her that she'll be fine. I'll be with you tonight. Oh, thank you, Mr. Sheffield. And then he awkwardly is like, when I say I'll be with you, I meant I'll stay with you. I don't mean that I'll be with you. And she's like, okay, got it. You're not good at moments. I see. And he's like, I'm sorry, I'm English.
Mm-hmm.
But she basically tries to tell him, she gives him a hug and she tells him, I think I'm over the hump. You go on to bed. I'll be up in a few minutes. And Maxwell believes her, stupidly, as we find out. Did you consider this all one scene?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, me too. So Maxwell walks out and he goes into the hallway outside his office where he's talking to Niles, who advises him, don't trust her, sir. At this stage, they're very sneaky. They'll say or do anything for a fix. And Maxwell's like, oh, please, Niles. We're talking about and as he's talking, he put his hands kind of on his hips. And then he realizes she stole my wallet. And so he goes back into the living room and Fran is walking sort of, shall we say, suspiciously.
Mm-hmm.
And he asks her if she has his credit card. She, in a muffled voice, says no. And he basically follows her and says, give it to me. And she turns around and it turns out the credit card is in her mouth. And he basically says to her, as if she were a dog, give it to me, drop it, drop it, drop it. She lets it fall from her mouth, and he says, good girl, and pats her head. And I think she growls at one point, and
She's
so
like
unlike,
whimpering.
yeah, then she whimpers as he hugs her. So usually we have Niles comparing Cece to a dog. Here we have Fran being compared to a dog by Maxwell.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to add anything?
No, the next scene, they are on the couch, asleep, and Maxwell's more in a sitting position, and Fran's kind of leaning up on him,
Mm-hmm.
and Fran's saying in her sleep, "Yes, yes, oh, I want it." And Maxwell's stirring, opens his eyes, kind of looking. Give it to me. Does it come in navy? And then so he wakes her up. Miss Fine, it's morning. We did it. We did? I didn't feel anything. Oh, but you were great, Mr. Sheffield. He's like, no, I mean, we made it through the night. And they say the first 24 hours are the hardest. So Fran's like, oh, yeah, yeah. I just need to avoid temptation now. And of course, at that moment, Val walks in from the back of the room, and her hands are full of Tupperware, and she says, "Oh, I'm here to get ready for the Tupperware party." And immediately though, like Fran starts like dramatically to Maxwell, "Oh, hold me," because there's temptation right there. And Val's like, oh, like mouthing, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and Fran's like waving her away as she hugs Mr. Sheffield. Do you have anything to add?
I do not. Um, so yeah. So then I believe we're back in the kitchen.
Yes.
And Maxwell comes in and talks to Niles, asking if the Tupperware invasion is over yet. And it starts with Niles staring, like he's holding clearly his new toy from the Tupperware party, and he's examining it, and he's like, "Oh, sorry, just admiring my bag saver. It's for storing old bags. Here, Miss Babcock has always wanted her own office." And Maxwell doesn't take the bait and instead just asks, "How did Miss Fine hold up?" "Oh, she was fine through the jazzy tumblers and the remarkable bowls, when who should walk in but Heather Biblow? No, yes, no, yes, and she's out to here." And he like cups the air around his abdomen. And Maxwell asks, "Preggers?" And Niles says, "You didn't hear it from me." And so needless to say, that's where we get the bombshell that Heather Biblow is pregnant. And so anyway, back to how Miss Fine did. She was very brave. She gave Niles a big hug and went straight to her Shoppers Anonymous meeting. Mm-hmm. And Maxwell gets this goofy smile on his face, and he's like, "That was very nice of her to give you a big hug, wasn't it?" "Oh, yes, I thought so." "Oh, stop her, sir. I just cashed my check." Mm-hmm. And Maxwell asks, "Well, do you know where she went?" And Niles says, "Well, with what you pay me, she probably went to an outlet store in Jersey, but you didn't hear it from me." Do you have anything you want to add, or do you want to take us to?
Well, you didn't hear it from me, I think is kind of pointed to like with what he pays him.
Yes.
That's how I interpreted that.
I took it as like the complaint about how little he's paid. You didn't hear.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't have anything to add. So in the next scene, Fran is at the store, and she's like, the sales lady saying, they're closing soon. One more pair of earrings. Come on, just a couple of hoops for the road, lady. And Maxwell walks in, and he's like, "Oh, I've been looking for you for hours." And Fran's like, "Go away. I don't want you to see me like this." And she's sat down at this point in front of a mannequin, and she quickly kind of adjusts her like hair, and then she's like, "Okay." Turn to him, because apparently she just needed to spruce up a little bit.
Correct. It wasn't the existential, like, "Don't look at me."
Mm-hmm. And Maxwell's trying to comfort her, like, "Oh, this is just symptomatic. You're transferring your feelings of loss." And Fran's like, "Have you been talking to Gracie?" "Yes." And she's like, "Oh, it just like it's not about him, it's what it represents." so long as he was a single miserable loser, I was happy. But he's now going to have a family, and meanwhile the years are passing by. 27, 28, 29, 29, 29. And Maxwell's like, "Oh, your time will come. You're a wonderful woman. Any man would be thrilled to have you." I don't mean have you. I know you're not good at moments.
Right.
And he's like, "I know you want a family of your own, but in the meantime, how about accept, like 3 children who adored you and a man whose life would be very empty without you," which is very sweet.
It really is.
Um, but she, is saying, "Well, but don't you ever feel like, but he's found someone to love. Don't you ever feel like you're never going to find that or something like that?"
What if that doesn't happen to me? Don't
Yeah,
you ever feel that
feel
way?
that way. And he says, "Yes." And then they start, like, their gazes kind of interlock,
Hmm.
and then they kiss.
Uh-huh.
And it's not just a peck. They kiss. And then as they pull apart, Fran immediately faints, like, to the ground. But Maxwell doesn't notice right away. He's kind of turned away. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, Miss Fine. I shouldn't have done that. But, you said this, I said that, and you were," and then he finally turns, "Where?" And then he looks, "Oh, my, Miss Fine, what are you doing?" And, he's helping her up, and she goes, "Oh, Mr. Sheffield, what are you doing here? What happened?" And he's like, "What?" And she's like, "Oh, I must have had, like, the shopper's blackout." And she explains that there was someone in her group who had a blackout the day after Thanksgiving. And she woke up in a pile of Calvin Klein jeans, the loose fit. How is that for humiliating?
Right.
Um, and again, you can imagine my thoughts. Anyway, um, and then so the lady we saw at the beginning, like the cashier, or like the clerk at the store, kind of tells Fran once again, "I'm closing up the register." And Fran had apparently, prior to Mr. Sheffield getting there, filled the counter with stuff. And Fran, starts to, go to pay, but then she's like, "Actually, I don't want any, I don't want them
Gee, I
any."
don't yeah, I don't
Yeah,
think I want him anymore.
yeah, I don't think I want them anymore. And she kind of turns to Maxwell like, "I don't know what happened, but it was exactly what I needed." And then she goes on to say, like, she doesn't have the urge anymore to shop. Instead, "I have an urge for a cigarette." And then they leave, but if you I'm sure you noticed, uh Maxwell kind of has an arm around Fran's shoulder, and Fran's kind of leaning her head on his shoulder as they
Hmm.
walk out. And that is the episode. Do you have anything to add to that last scene?
I'm just gonna quote the last line, if that's okay.
Yep, go for it.
Um, so she's told, "Miss, I'm closing the register." And Fran looks at it. Come to think of it, yeah, I don't think I want them anymore. Gee, I don't know what happened, but it was exactly what I needed. It's strange. I think I'm over that whole shopping thing, but suddenly I've got such an urge for a cigarette,
Mm-hmm.
which is again one of those references that as children we probably wouldn't get.
Yep.
So that's all I wanted to add. Is there anything you want to talk about thematically before we jump into our shticks?
I thought it was interesting that there was never any talk about, there's a line here or there about, when she says her credit card's probably going to expire soon, but there's no actual consequence for her racking up all of that, at
That's
least not
fair.
addressed in this episode. Because I know
No.
these are like large purchases.
Yes. And also her room, the next time we see it, is back to its usual state.
Yeah. So I guess hopefully she got it all refunded.
Hopefully.
But I mean, it's like a significant amount of items and charges. So yeah, that's just one thing I know. Like that never came up,
True.
the consequence or anything.
No, that's a really good point, especially when we keep in mind the Christmas episode from season 1, where she had to write rubber checks to buy the kids Christmas presents, and then um, basically pawn her grandmother's watch, and after the the vase that Maxwell gave her for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really good point, that her finances probably have not changed significantly.
Nope.
So
Yeah.
no, that's a very good point.
Did you have anything you wanted to talk about?
I guess as an adult, I sort of found it an interesting comparison between shopping as an addiction to alcoholism, which is, I think, the comparison they are constantly drawing. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure how appropriate it is, I guess.
Yeah. Because personally, it rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. Because it could be alcohol or it could be any kind of substance use addiction, right? That they're
Mm-hmm.
drawing parallels to. And that can be so severe and, all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know.
Right. It can be debilitating.
I mean, it really does affect everybody around, So like to the extent that they're kind of making light of it in the way that because they're drawing very clear parallels in the terminology, the never trust them, they'll lie, like all of that kind of stuff. And so I'm glad you brought that up, that personally it didn't really rub me the right way.
Right. I do also want to say, on the other side of the coin, on the shopping front, my understanding is that retail therapy does have a time and a place for dealing with difficult emotions. I remember reading, I couldn't tell you which advice column or which newsletter had this suggestion, but their suggestion was, like, if you're really stressed and you feel like you need to get yourself a treat, go and pick out, I think the suggestion was hair scrunchies or some hair accessories, because you'll spend so much time narrowing down to the like one or two you absolutely want. So you'll get the like retail therapy aspect because like you're shopping, but you won't spend a ton of money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think recently people have used retail therapy.
Oh yeah,
more so
during the pandemic.
Exactly.
But I would say, like, and not to say, like, there are definitely people who, um, do end up spending way too much money shopping. Like, it can be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But just the way in which it was handled in this particular episode, like you said, I don't know to what extent it was appropriate to draw all of those parallels.
Pointed comparisons.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Watching it as an adult and with the intent of criticizing and looking at it with a critical lens, that's what struck me while rewatching it.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Anything else you wanted to kind of talk about generally before we jump into our shticks?
No, I'm ready to jump into favorite and not so favorite fashion.
Okay, so lead away. Did you have any favorite?
I did.
Not so. Okay.
I did. My favorite outfit is probably the most boring outfit she wore or wears in the entire series. It's the outfit she's wearing in her room when Maxwell is confronting her with her addiction. It's basically a black bodysuit. Okay. I thought she looked fantastic in it. I probably wouldn't wear it because I don't like bodysuits because I can't understand how people go to the bathroom.
It's not very practical.
Exactly. Like I don't want to be naked to go to the bathroom. That seems silly. But she looks fantastic in it, and the way her hair is, she's back to her, I guess, traditional Fran fine do, which I think we both agree we like better than the like parted hair we've seen in some recent episodes. So that is my favorite outfit she wears. I also kind of like her shopping outfit, the one that she's wearing, not when Maxwell finds her, but when she's dragging Gracie to all the different stores. It's, a black, again, looks like a black dress with like a short, like I guess a cropped animal print jacket. I kind of like that also. Did you have any favorite or not so favorite fashion?
I actually did like the skiing outfit.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's like a purple jacket, and it has kind of like gray at the sleeve and at the collar, but then she has black pants, and I think, is it gray boots? I don't know, and a little gray hat. But yeah, like it's a nice outfit.
Yeah, and I would mention, as we know from previous episodes, it's fake fur on the cuffs and the hat. I do like the color of that.
Yeah,
The purple is great.
It's a nice purple, like a deeper, darker.
Yeah.
So
It's also very flattering.
yeah, the cut's nice too. Did you have any other fashion you wanted to talk about?
Not really the fashion, but kind of the point you raised in the last scene where Maxwell finds her and she's like, "Oh, I don't want you to see me like this." And she's dressed like she normally is, and she just fixes her hair before she's like, okay, now we're good.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's just
also like that particular phrase, like at first it would make you think as in she's just like doesn't want him seeing her shopping, like in a tizzy over shopping. But then again, it flips our expectations by her just adjusting her hair.
right.
And good to go.
Right. Otherwise, I don't think. Oh, the last piece of fashion I will comment on, and then I promise we can jump to our next shtick. Did you see what Maggie was wearing in the scene where she says, Fran's always dragging me into stores and making me buy whatever looked great on me. That's not going to stop. Did you see what she was wearing?
Isn't that like the suede baby blue?
It's the baby blue dress, like Asian cut dress that we were talking about a couple weeks ago. So I just wanted to point out that as you pointed out with Fran, it's not just Fran, it's other members of the cast who are re-wearing outfits, which is realistic.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, you want to jump to notable New Yorkers?
I would love to. Would you like to start?
Sure. So again, we at the beginning, Frasier's brother.
Yeah.
So that's a reference to the show Frasier. And isn't the brother's name? Isn't it Niles?
It is Niles.
Okay. So, and then again, there's a reference to the Emmys, which may have come up before, may not have, but it's the award show. And then we get a litany of Dannys.
Yes.
Danny Thomas.
An American actor, comedian, nightclub, I think I want to say owner, or performer, a philanthropist, producer, and singer whose career spanned over 60 years. He's the founder of St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital in Tennessee. And most interestingly, for our discussion, he died in 1991.
Okay. So, yeah. Okay.
Not him.
Yep. Danny Kaye.
An American actor, comedian, dancer, and singer known for physical comedy and pantomime. As relevant to this show, he died in 1987. And before you jump to the next Danny, I just need to throw this out there. Both Dannys are courtesy of our friends at Wikipedia. Also, courtesy of our friends at Wikipedia, Danny Kaye's wife was named Sylvia Fine.
Oh, really?
Which I just found too perfect to not include in our show.
Yeah. Wow. So the third Danny is Danny Bonaducci.
According to our friends at Wikipedia, an American actor, comedian, professional wrestler, radio personality, and television personality known for his role on The Partridge Family.
Reuben Kincaid.
Reuben Kincaid was a character on The Partridge Family who was played by David Madden. The actor died in 2014.
Oh, okay. And for clarification, again, Danny Bonaducci was not dead.
Correct. Yes, he is still kicking, I believe.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, I realized I did not include a death date. So yes, he is still alive.
Oh, quick. I'm sorry. This is a little outside of our shtick, but while I'm going through and I see it, I was going to comment that when Fran shows up to the table and she says she could care less about Danny, it's again, that means she does care.
Correct.
Sorry. Had to put that in there while I thought about it.
Fair.
Okay. You better shop around.
Oh, yes, that is the title of the song is Shop Around, and it's by The Miracles. It was a smash hit in 1960. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia as well.
Now, I know there's, you had mentioned wanting to talk about the different stores. I didn't write down the names of the ones from the transition scene. So if you want to.
I did, but before we get there, can we swing back to the scene in the kitchen? Not the kitchen, sorry, the dining room with the family. So there's that Family Feud reference we've already identified. That's a game show that was created apparently in 1976. And that's according to familyfeud.com. They reference Malamars, which according to NPR is actually a snack, a cookie or snack, I guess, that's been around for over 100 years.
Wow.
I did not know. They reference The Way We Were, which is a 1973 Barbara Streisand film telling the story of Katie Morosky and Hubble Gardner. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. And then getting to the different facades of stores, there was Bergdorf Goodman, which is a luxury department store on Fifth Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. That is according to our friends at Wikipedia. There was a Chanel store, which also according to our friends at Wikipedia is a French luxury fashion line that was started by Coco Chanel. We also see Henry Bendel. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I could be wrong. According to our friends at Wikipedia, it was a women's department store in New York City that was established in 1895. It was actually the first retailer to sell its own fragrance, to offer in-store makeovers, and host its own fashion show. They are no longer in existence. So that's, again, according to our friends at Wikipedia. Then in the scene in Jersey, Fran references Ann Taylor, which is a women's clothing company with the tagline feminine, modern, thoughtful, elegant. That's according to AnnTaylor.com. She referenced Contempo Casuals, which according to our friends at The Budget Fashionista, was a mid-price store that carried the latest fashions and known as the, and I quote, go-to store for all your jelly shoe and pattern jam pant needs.
Jelly shoes.
I thought it was a notable quote, so I wanted to share it.
Yeah, that takes me back.
I believe they're no longer in existence also. Fran also references The Limited, which was an American clothing retailer that operated between the early 1960s and the late 2010s. It shut down when its, I can't remember if it was The Limited itself or its like corporate parent filed for bankruptcy in 2017. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. You want to, I think two more, three more stores, but I'm willing to let you jump in.
Oh, I don't have additional stores. So
okay.
Like,
so maybe stores is too strong a word, but there, I can't remember if they were actual references or if they were just like the names on the backs of the walls in the mall. There are references to Donna Karan and Giorgio, both of which we've spoken about previously. And then the fancy credit card receipt that Maxwell shoves under Fran's nose, which I neglected to mention, leaves
Oh yeah, a
an
smudge.
ink mark on her nose. Yeah, smudge. The receipt was from Bloomingdale's, which is an American luxury department store founded in New York City. They are still around, and that is according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mhm.
Do you want to add any others? Not store related?
Stores. Okay. Past the stores. I was curious. I don't know, like, were Burr animal freezer treats a thing?
I should have looked that up. Let's see. Yes, they were.
Okay.
According to, well, I think so. Let's see. According to our friends at Worth Point, Tupperware Bur Animals set popsicle pudding pop treats, and they have a picture. Although it doesn't look exactly like what Cece was eating. So
The cow.
yeah, exactly. Which also then begs the question about the Remarkables, which according to our friends at Google, yes, there is such a thing as a Tupperware Remarkable. And I assume the jazzy tumblers are also a thing. Yes, they are.
And I
According,
believe Soloflex is also a thing.
yes, it is. It is a workout machine, which looks something like what Fran was using while on the phone with trying to order something else. There was also a reference to Joan Rivers. She was an American actress, comedian, producer, television host, and writer who is known for being acerbic and self-deprecating. She's considered by many to be a pioneer in women's comedy. Also, just a general reference to outlets in Jersey. There are multiple outlet malls in New Jersey, which a native New Yorker would know. I have one other, so if you want to jump in, otherwise.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's also the reference to this 12-step program, which again is often associated with like Alcohol's Anonymous. And earlier too, there's, the reference to Victoria's Secret. I believe we've talked about Victoria's Secret before. Now, let's see here. Do you want to go with your last one?
Sure. There was the reference to the giant slalom, which is not a giant shalom. Shalom is a different thing. According to our friends at Wikipedia, the giant slalom, I'm going to totally mispronounce that, is, and I quote, an alpine skiing, alpine snowboarding discipline. So.
Yeah, and I think I'm out.
Okay. Cool. I think we were fairly comprehensive.
Yeah. So, Yiddish cup.
Yes. Okay. So we don't have as much as we did last week. I have 3, so stop me if you have more. First, Gracie talks about how she's plotzing with the news. We've talked about the word plotzing before. It's basically to collapse or be besides oneself with a strong emotion. We have shalom, which translates roughly to hello, goodbye, and peace. It's, according to our friends at mygewishlearning.com, it is one of the most hallowed Jewish values. They actually have a very nice essay describing, where it comes from, how it's used in the Torah. And anyway, for our purposes, we'll leave it at hello, goodbye, peace, and it's, an important Jewish value. And then the last one was Fran refers to Danny as the biggest schnook in the world. A schnook is a fool or a person who is easily duped. Which, I mean, it obviously sounds like it has a negative connotation, but I guess the denotation is not exactly what I would have imagined. Like I would have thought it would be more negative than just someone who's easily duped. I think of it as the person doing the duping.
Interesting.
But that's just me.
Yeah.
Did I miss any?
I don't believe so.
Awesome. All right. Would you like to take us to our 90s nostalgia?
Yes. So when Fran's in her room, she has like the cordless phone that she's using to call in her orders.
Yep.
Uh, Again, these days, probably going to be a cell phone. And even though I think there's still like programs, different shopping networks where you can call in, I think for the most part, people would shop online.
Hmm.
Your
Yeah.
turn.
No, I agree. Actually, that was, I think, the biggest part of this that I guess seems a little outdated. I feel like most people, if they were going through a time like Fran was, and we're going to rely solely on retail therapy, I feel like they would have done most of the purchasing online and had their packages delivered.
Yep.
So the fact that like she was dragging Gracie to physical store after physical store to mall after mall seemed a little out of date.
Driving out to Jersey.
I mean, people do that. I mean, I
Yes.
assume they still do like in this day and age, but like pre-pandemic, that was like a day trip. Um, Probably not like a half day trip the way Fran tried to make it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, your turn.
Yeah. So again, kind of the whole theme throughout, like, well, you didn't hear it from me. They're showing really word of mouth, whereas I feel like today you would find a lot of stuff out on via social media.
Mm-hmm.
So probably they would have had a heads up if Heather Biblo was pregnant. um,
True.
through some type of social media account. Same thing in terms of if, Danny got engaged, if it's Facebook official or some type of announcement, online.
That's a very good point. Although I will say one of my friends got engaged in the not so distant past. And before putting it up on social media, she called people who were important to her to tell them like over the phone, which I
Yeah.
thought was such a nice touch. So like Val's doing the opposite. Val's breaking the bad news in person instead of, I
Hmm.
mean, I guess there was no social media, so she had no choice. But
Hmm.
I'm gonna go with old cars,
Yep.
including an old limo.
Yes. Yes, we definitely see that driving about. Um, so yeah, and again, Maxwell had to spend, poor Maxwell spent hours apparently looking for Fran.
Mm-hmm.
And again, depending on how close they are, he could have texted or called, or if they had, because some people have where they can spot where other people are. They have certain apps for that.
Like
Or
find my phone.
yeah, but there's like Life 360 and like other apps that specifically like you can keep track of where the people are. So I wouldn't, I don't think they'd necessarily have that, but at the very least, you could have texted to be like, where are you?
Fair. The last one I have is in that very, very short scene 3, where Fran is getting Gracie that hot dog and shoving it in between the boxes. Behind them in like the crowd, there was a guy rollerblading, and it
Oh,
made me think of our conversation a couple weeks ago
yeah. Mhm.
about how rollerblading seems a little outdated now.
Yeah. Same thing, like Tupperware parties feels more dated. I mean, there still are some, I think, but more more often these days is different types of products that you would have like little gatherings for. And I think a lot of those MLMs use social media like Facebook Lives and stuff to have parties.
Oh,
I'm not
interesting.
too knowledgeable about that, but I think there has been kind of a shift. But I think there still are like hostess gifts and stuff like that for those type of events, like in
Interesting.
stuff like that. So, so yeah. Anything else for 90s nostalgia?
I'm out.
Okay. So this week we actually get to add to the kiss count,
We do. We do.
and it is now 5.
Correct.
Do you have some future fun for us?
I always have future fun for us. So I'm going to start. I think most of these are pretty minor, but they're future fun anyway. So in the first scene, Niles, as you pointed out, comments about how wasn't it enough for you to lie on my credit card application? And obviously Fran was filling out a credit card application at that point. In a later episode, Niles finds a different credit card application that Fran was working on that she had yet to submit. On that application, she lied about her income. Actually, it's kind of funny because Niles was like cleaning her room, sees it, and says, "Oh, it's confidential. I shouldn't look at it." But what if she listed me as reference? And I have a right to know. And so he looks and he sees what she put as her income, which, for the record, Val is the one who encouraged her to overstate her income, because I think Fran said like the last time she listed her actual income, the credit card company sent her a form for government cheese or something like that.
Wow.
So she lied about her income, and Niles sees it, doesn't know it's a lie, and gets very upset because he is underpaid, and so he quits in anger, and he ends up being hired by Aunt Frida as a houseboy. Fran and Cece compete to be the woman of the house to hire the, Niles replacement, and Cece beats Fran to the punch, and hires a guy, I believe his name is Trevor, who does not last beyond the episode because he is not a, shall we say, nosy busybody, a yenta like Niles is, and Niles returns. So that's one. Two, related to Fran's, actually, I'll save that. There, in one of the scenes in, I think, the New Jersey Mall, we see in the back the name Todd Oldham. He's a designer who we did not talk about, and I specifically saved him for future fun. He, in the show, is Fran's cousin Toddy, and we will meet him later in this season in the episode The Fashion Show, where Maxwell hires Fran to do the costumes for a Broadway benefit. And Fran, in turn, hires her cousin Toddy, who's in the schmata business. And then we find out that he's actually Todd Oldham. So, yeah, that's kind of fun. Third, in that scene where Val comes set up for the Tupperware party, and Fran's like, "Oh, Mr. Sheffield, hold me, hold me." I think in season 4, season 5, Fran actually says to Maxwell something like, "Well, if you're going to touch and hold me every time I'm upset, I got to tell you, this is pretty much going to be my mood from here on out." And then finally, and I think most notably, or at least for those who have seen the show before, they will know what I'm referring to and why this is such an important feature fun spoiler. In season 6, the Sheffield family, including Fran and Cece and Niles, all go to Vail. I believe it's Vail, for a ski trip as some of President Clinton's closest friends. And Bill and Hillary find Fran charming and invite her to go skiing with them, which prompts Maxwell to try to teach her to ski after she gets kicked out of her beginner ski class. And the two of them get stranded in an avalanche, and marvelous things happen. I won't say what those marvelous things are, but for those who are familiar, you know. All right, that's all the feature fun I have.
Okay, so time for episode ratings. As a reminder, we rate the episodes from 1 to 5 lipsticks, but also to some extent, as with Whose Line Is It Anyway, everything's made up and the points don't matter. But this week it's my turn first.
I love when it's your turn.
I know.
It makes me happy.
Yeah, and so a bit of a struggle just because, as I mentioned, there are things that kind of rubbed me the wrong way with this episode. There's several quote unquote jokes that not so great to me. I like, obviously, that there's another kiss. Then she forgets. And I'm not a huge fan of like amnesia tropes. Not that we really get into that, with this.
Well, just while you're thinking, for the record, we are still counting it as kiss number 5, even if Fran doesn't remember it.
Yes, yes, it happened.
Exactly. It's an objective thing. We saw it. It happened. Okay.
So I think I'm gonna give it a 3. How about you?
I had a sense you were going to give it a 3. Um, so this is an episode that obviously I know by name. I've seen it multiple times. It is funny. If I weren't looking at it with a critical eye, I would rate it higher, because it is, again, an episode I'm familiar with. There's comfort there, but there are some things that, watching it in this context are a little, I don't want to say concerning, but they're just not as funny, when you're looking at it with a critical eye. Um, but that said, it also is setting in motion some other things that we're going to talk about. I think later in this season, and next season as well. Oh, I have more future fun I could share, but I'll wait. I I like this one better than last week's episode, so I think I'm going to give it a 4,
Okay, fair
be-
enough.
because I mean, I can always adjust it later. So,
Hmm.
all right. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
I don't believe so.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 55. Oy vey, you're gay.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.